So this is not the video that I had planned on making, but over the weekend something quite scary happened. I was testing out the Mingda D3 Pro 3D printer and I had noticed that it was under extruding a bit, and I went ahead and checked it and confirmed that yes, when I told it to extrude 100 millimeters of filament, it was only extruding 85 millimeters. So I was doing a pretty standard E-step calibration, and I heated up the hot end to 220, went ahead and plugged it into my computer. And as I was waiting on Pronterface to load up, all of a sudden I heard what sounded like a spitting sound. And the only way I can describe it is kind of like water coming out of a spout, or even like if you've ever put tea on a kettle. And I looked over at the printer and saw a little bit of smoke coming out of the nozzle. And at first when I looked at it, I didn't actually know what was going on. I thought that maybe it was just some filament because it was very minimal. And so I waited a second, looked over at it, and then all of a sudden I saw a lot more smoke coming out of the machine. And that is when I panicked and pulled the power on the machine. The printer quickly filled up my work area with smoke, so we were sure to open all the windows right away and air out the place so that way there was no nasty fumes sticking around. In my 6 years of testing out 3D printers, this is definitely one of the scariest or craziest incidents that I've ever had. Sure, in my testings I've had issues where I've had some boards that have fried components where there's a little bit of black smoke. I've had a power supply fail that was kind of freaky, but this was really intense and very quick. It happened so quickly where 1 second things are fine, the next second, again, there was tons of smoke that ended up coming out of the hot end. And it really got me thinking as I looked around at like what could have or what would have happened had I not been here to be able to pull the plug on this. I was very thankful that I had not gone ahead and ran a really long print or an overnight print with this printer like I so often do. It does seem like what happened was as the printer was heating up and the USB connection went into the computer, it caused something with the motherboard to freeze. And so all of the statuses were going on were not responding back to the board. So things like max temp, things like thermal runway did not trigger. And the heater cartridge was just getting hotter and hotter and hotter and hotter. I don't actually know what the temperature it hit when it was smoking, but I would imagine it was well north of 300 Celsius. And I did reach out to the manufacturer. I let them know about my experience, let them know what happened. I asked them to please check firmware to make sure all of the safety features were enabled. Please do some serious QCing on some other things with the machine as far as the electronics and the heater cartridge and the thermistor. And they did respond back saying, of course, they apologize. This is not something they've seen before. They sent me a copy of the firmware and I did check. All the safety features were enabled. So I don't exactly know what exactly could have gone awry, whether it was just a freak thing or whether there's actually an underlying issue with these machines. But I did post and again mention the model of the machine, because if you do have this machine, I certainly would recommend not printing unsupervised. So this video is not going to be nearly as fun as the video I initially had planned, but certainly going to be very important. Arguably the most important thing we can discuss on this channel is proper 3D printer safety. This video is going to be aimed at people that have just gotten into 3D printing or people that are thinking about getting into 3D printing, and I'm going to be giving you some safety tips and some safety recommendations and things that you should be checking out. 3D printing is an absolutely awesome technology that I love, and it's a major focal point in my day-to-day life. But hopefully by following along here, you'll be able to ensure that you are printing safely and responsibly. So without further ado, let's get right into this video. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the 3D printer's firmware. Now the firmware is the code that actually lives on the machine that allows it to move around, to operate, has all the functionalities and feature, and there are safety features that are baked into the firmware or should be baked into the firmware. In this video, specifically, we're talking about Marlin firmware, which is definitely the most common and the most popular, used in the broadest spectrum of 3D printers that you will find. These safety features should be present in all modern day mainstream firmware, such as things like Smoothie and RepRap, but again, we're focusing on Marlin here because that covers the most diverse range. And so in Marlin, there are safety features built in, which we are going to go over now. So taking a look at some of Marlin's safety features, it's got min temp, where a min temp is there to show you if your thermistor has fallen out or if it has become an open circuit. Then there's max temp, which is there to show you whether your temperature sensor wires are shorted together. It can also show you if you have an issue with your printer's MOSFET or relay, which is causing the heater cartridge to stay on. Marlin also has PID tuning built in, which PID tuning's purpose is to ensure that your heater cartridge, let's say you set it up to 220, is going to very quickly and accurately hit 220 and not deviate from that very much at all. If you have a printer that has not been PID tuned correctly, then when it goes up, it might shoot that 220. I've seen printers where I've set it to like 220, it shoots up to like 238, then climbs back down, and then kind of eventually finds its way to where it's supposed to be and still deviates a bit. And if you're on the lower side of the temperature scale, that might not be that big of a deal, but let's say you're printing with a non-all metal hot end at like 245 Celsius and it overshoots it by 20 Celsius, well, you are going to be damaging your hot end, you're going to damage the PTFE lining, and it could potentially be dangerous. So having proper PID tuning is very important to ensure that your printer starts up quickly, to ensure that it is efficient, and also, which is most important, to make sure that it is safely reaching its target temperature as reliably and consistently as possible. There's also the heating failed error, which will show if your printer fails to increase in temperature by a certain value in a set period of time. This will essentially show you if you have a disconnected, loose, or incorrectly configured thermistor, as well as a disconnected heater cartridge. Lastly, we have thermal runway. This is there to monitor your printer's temperature stability. So if your printer climbs up or drops away from its target temperature for too long, this will trigger, which will indicate that there's either a poor connection between your thermistor and your hot end, an improper PID tuning, or in some very extreme cases that you are just printing in a very cold environment. But it's the other two that we are more concerned about, and that is why it is such an important feature to have enabled. So with these errors, they will cause your printer to halt, they will disable the heater elements, and they will not clear until you actually hard reset your 3D printer. Of course, when things are running correctly, none of these safety features are going to trigger, but in the instance that there is something going wrong, you absolutely want to make sure that all of these things are enabled in your firmware. Just about all reputable 3D printing manufacturers should have these enabled by default. In 2020, there's absolutely no excuse, and it is really irresponsible to have these safety features not automatically enabled. If you have a 3D printer and you have any inkling of doubt whether these are enabled, I highly recommend that you check for yourself, as it, again, is always better to be safe than sorry. Now, pretty much all of the methods for checking each and every one of these safety features for being enabled has been gone over in grave detail by other content creators. I'll go ahead and link you in the description of this video to different content creators that have put together awesome videos showing you how to very easily check that all of these safety features are enabled. If for some reason anything in these videos are unclear, or there's a certain one of these that you're not able to figure out, please let me know in the comments down below, and I'd be more than happy to revisit the topic myself and maybe make a tutorial on how to check out one of these certain safety features to make sure that it is enabled on your 3D printer. Now that we've covered the things in firmware that need to be enabled to ensure that we are printing safely, we're going to go over some other tips and recommendations. In general, it is not recommended to leave a printer unattended, to have prints running for long periods of time while you're away or sleeping. However, with that being said, because of the extent of time that prints can often take, I understand that this is not very realistic, and I myself often am guilty of leaving prints running for many, many hours or even days in some instances. Now, with that being said, I will never run a very long print on a printer without making sure that all of those safety features that we previously covered are enabled. I also will always run smaller prints during the daytime, or even longer prints during the daytime initially, to make sure that the printer is consistently putting out parts, that it is reliable, and that there's no hiccups going on with the machine. Also, even once a machine has built or earned my trust, I'll still always make sure that the first few layers are laying down properly. Typically, if something is going to go wrong, it's going to go wrong in those first few layers. I couldn't tell you the number of times that I've seen somebody that started a print job not watch the first layer go down and comes back to the print head being completely encased in plastic. Not only is this in best case scenario going to ruin your print and potentially destroy your hot end and extruder, but this can also be incredibly dangerous. So again, making sure that those first few layers are going down correctly and inspecting that they have proper adhesion is going to be doing yourself wonders. This should be an obvious one, but if you're 3D printing, please make sure you've got a smoke detector that is actually working and operational and has batteries in it. If your printer is enclosed, there are also fire suppression systems that you can actually place inside of the enclosure. In the case that there ever were to be a fire, they'll actually release like a powder or a fire suppressing agent that should be able to put out any kind of fire that the printer could start. They even have things like smart smoke detectors, where if you put a smart smoke detector next to your printer and you've got your printer hooked up to a smart plug, you can have it set up where if that smoke detector detects anything, it automatically kills the power to that outlet. That is something that is super cool. You've also got Octoprint. Octoprint is a great option and compatible with just about any 3D printer that you can connect to over USB. Octoprint will wirelessly let you monitor your print jobs, and you can hook up a webcam to it. That way, if you know you're going to be away or you have to go to work, maybe on your break or lunchtime, you can at least quickly check in and make sure your printer's looking fine. If anything's going wrong or your print seems to be dislodged, you can kill the print, and if for some reason that does not work, or again, it's an instance where you don't need to just kill the print, you need to kill the power, I do highly recommend having your printer hooked up to, again, kind of like an Alexa smart plug or some kind of a smart plug where from your phone, if nobody's home, you can hit power and it'll just kill the power to that outlet, or at least to that plug to your printer. So again, huge fan of smart electronics, and I think that with 3D printers it is like a perfect marriage having again, smart smoke detector, smart outlet, and the printer all hooked up together. So again, aside from all these recommendations, I highly recommend going with a 3D printer from a reputable manufacturer. That is going to certainly increase your odds of having a machine that at least is built correctly and that a proper QC has been put in place. I also, this sounds obvious, I'm sure, but don't print around things that are going to be flammable. What I mean by that is, if you have the option to print on like a metal storage rack versus a piece of wood furniture, put the machine on a metal storage rack. That is a much better option. Of course, you can never be too safe, and if 3D printing is something you decide you're just going to run while you're around and you're able to keep an eye on the machine, there is nothing wrong with that, and I think that being as responsible and safe as possible is never a bad idea. Now, I also do want to say, with the amount of 3D printers that are out there in the wild, 3D printers catching on fire is not a very common thing. However, it has happened more than once or twice, and in my opinion, that is more than enough times. It is something that is very scary. You typically, a lot of people, if you're like me, you're printing in your house with your loved ones, with other people, so at least you can do is make sure that you're being responsible, again, by using a printer and that's got the firmware set up and having these additional safety features in place. 3D printing is such an awesome technology, but remember, it is a tool and not a toy, and it should be treated as such. If you do have any other safety recommendations I didn't cover in this video, please let me know in the comments down below. I know on this channel, I do a lot of sharing, but you guys also share back, and it allows me to learn and grow, and I'd really like to get the conversation started, especially on such an important topic. So again, if there's anything that you think of that I missed, or just things that you've been doing that are for good, safe practice, let us know in the comments down below. I hope that you were able to walk away from this video feeling a little bit more educated in terms of 3D printing safety. And again, this is something that is an incredibly important topic when 3D printing. So on that note, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more great videos. I make a video every single Saturday, so there is always fresh content coming your way. If you do want to support the channel a bit more, I will place links down below to my Patreon. I am super thankful for all of my Patreon supporters that allow me to spend more time doing what I love, which is making content for you guys. On that note, this has been Daniel from ModBot. I look forward to seeing you guys in my next video, and I'm out. Peace, guys.